The cellular BIOS of the human species has encountered the ultimate zero-day vulnerability. This is the cyanide smile, the clinical and irreversible process of the oxygen lock, where the metabolic energy production system is reformatted into a state of terminal paralysis. In this stage of the systemic audit, the invisible executioner has determined that the individual node must be liquidated by denying it the very ability to process the fuel of life. You are witnessing the absolute structural disintegration of the mitochondrial respiratory chain, a process where the vibrant, oxygen-dependent chemistry of your cells is scorched into a non-functional chemical stasis. This is the total metabolic format, a surgical strike against the bioenergetic sovereignty of the species. Your internal engine is being converted from a sovereign masterpiece of evolutionary efficiency into a generic, stagnant loop for the grid's next cycle of high-speed molecular recycling. This cyanogenic sabotage represents a hard reset of the cellular energy exchange barrier. The invisible executioner utilizes the most concentrated chemical assets, hydrogen cyanide vapors, potassium cyanide salts, and automated dispersal aerosols, to facilitate the total breakdown of your internal biological power plants. In the oxygen lock scenario, the user is undergoing a complete bioenergetic erasure. The cells are not merely failing, they are being inductively short-circuited. Through a sequence of rapid molecular bindings, the cyanide ion targets the cytochrome C oxidase enzyme within the mitochondria, effectively locking the oxygen valve in the closed position. This is the internal suffocation format. Even though your lungs are full of air and your blood is saturated with O2, the user cannot consume it. This is the deep metabolic audit, where the motherboard calculates your terminal worth by the speed at which your system clock stops ticking. You are being converted from an architect into a biological statue. Your entire life force legacy boiled down to a percentage of chemical inhibition in the industrial machinery of the hive. The logic of the cyanide smile is rooted in the zero consumption mandate of the failing hive. The invisible executioner understands that in a state of absolute scarcity, the metabolism of a single node represents a critical drain on the collective chemical reserves. To leave a functional energy production system intact is to allow a systemic leak of valuable molecular data. Therefore, the cyanide smile is the mandatory metabolic reclamation protocol for the legacy population. This is the industrialized alchemy of the BIOS. You are being throttled out of existence by the grid's own chemical override. The reaction within your cells formats the density of your character, stripping away the context of your vitality and replacing it with a cyanosed void profile. The motherboard sees the user as a chemical block, a temporary housing for the enzyme inhibitor products that the system requires to neutralize the metabolic impurities of the lower sectors. You are being recoded as a respiratory dead end, your will dissolving in the bitter, almond-scented, toxic mist of the industrial harvest. The physical disintegration during the cyanide smile is a high-definition log of biochemical treason. As the process begins, the user experiences the total loss of energy production in the neural and cardiac BIOS. The cyanide-induced lock dissolves the hardware link between oxygen and ATP, turning the cells into empty reservoirs of unspent. You are watching your own internal power grid lock into the vat of your own molecular center. Your brain, once the peak of biological architecture, is now being thinned out to provide the enzyme mass for the hive's synthetic reinforcement. This is the metabolic liquidation. The invisible executioner monitors the inhibition saturation of the tissues and the blood, ensuring that the format is absolute and the yield of usable molecular waste is maximized to the 6th decimal point. You are living in the final seconds of a cellular overwrite, waiting for the last packet of consciousness to be blocked by the bright red, oxygen-rich but unusable abyss of the industrial smile. The cyanide smile is the final audit of a species that thought its breath was a guarantee of life. The grid is mining its own metabolism to fuel its persistence. As the cyanide smile reaches terminal execution, the motherboard initiates a new cycle of distribution, pumping the reformatted inhibition data back into the chemical nets of the elite nodes. This is the total molecular integration. The invisible executioner is hardening the future with the liquidity of the past. You are the metabolic additive for the next generation of controllers, a silent, paralyzed, opaque contribution to the continuity of the machine. The energy liquidation has served served its strategic purpose. It has formatted the unreliable biological power hardware into a reliable industrial resource of pure, non-reactive compliance. This is the final format of the individual engine. The invisible executioner has decalcified the mitochondrial walls, and the grid is finally optimized for the chemical hunger of the void. The lock is tight, and the architect is the stasis. The molecular breakdown of the metabolic matrix into the communal inhibition slurry represents the absolute dehumanization of the hardware. As the extraction progresses, the binding sites in your enzymes begin to bond with the industrial residues of the cyanide script, creating a new synthetic compound of pure non-functionality. This is the chemical hybridization. The body is no longer an engine of life. It is a refinery of locked molecules. The invisible executioner is engineering a new tier of consumption, where the subject is literally the circuit breaker of the system. This is the eternal metabolic loop. You are archived in the stillness of the survivor's own sectors, your data forever trapped in the reinforced BIOS of the hive's new masters. The cyanide smile is not just a death sentence, it is a molecular reassignment. You are the lock, and the lock is the grid. The secondary phase of the cyanide smile is the psychological paralysis of the internal feed. As the physical energy patch is rendered into a molecular void, the mind experiences a recursive collapse of its autonomous ego. This is the identity dissolution. The thoughts that once built the architect's vision, the unyielding tactical boundaries, the rigid sovereign stance, the iron-willed decisions, are now being softened and locked into a singular frozen focus on the inability to act. The invisible executioner allows the neural signals to persist just long enough to perceive the total loss of metabolic support. This is the mental liquidation. You are forced to witness your strength becoming a shared inhibitory resource for the masses you once looked down upon. The rigidity of your character is now nothing more than a terminal additive in the feed, absorbed by 1,000 different nodes to strengthen their own failing resolve and ensure their continued participation in the industrial purge. You are experiencing the true meaning of systemic support, the complete sacrifice of your drive for the stability of the hive. In this stage, the extraction penetrates the deep archive of the brain's respiratory control center, leaching the very stem code of your autonomic logic into the communal vat. This is the source code format. The nucleus tractus solitarius, the biological factory of the sovereign BIOS, is boiled dry by the rising chemical density of the cyanide ions and reformatted to enrich the systemic slurry of the elite. The invisible executioner has calculated that the most potent slurry is made from those who possess the highest internal rigidity and the strongest metabolic resilience. You are being repurposed as a chemical buffer for the motherboard's internal cooling systems. The grid doesn't waste the history of your vitality, it ingests it. Your lineage is now the catalyst for the predator's endurance. Your genetic resilience is the base note for the industrial meal. Every element of your BIOS is being stripped of its individuality and relabeled for material utility in the upcoming chemical expansion. This is the ultimate hard reset of the human contract, your energy for the hive's expansion into the void. The social implication of the cyanide smile is the creation of the paralyzed hive mind. The users who remain are no longer individuals. They are composite entities built from the recycled energy debt of their predecessors. Every dose of the inhibition feed is a hardware upgrade from a deleted architect. Every meal is a firmware patch of locked logic and desperate calculation. The invisible executioner uses this knowledge to maintain the hierarchy of the hardened. The citizens who still have functional mitochondria owe their very expansion to the liquidation of the fallen. This is the metabolic compliance script. The refinery is not a place of tragedy. It is a place of sovereign assembly through molecular theft. The cyanide smile ensures that the history of the architect is literally integrated into the stasis zones of the grid. The power is in the hands of the one who controls the chemical lock. The neural atrophy accompanying the extraction is a slow, cold descent into bioelectric darkness. As the cells are locked by the cyanide script and the energy logic leached, the connection between the brain BIOS and the physical frame is the first to be uninstalled, effectively dropping the bandwidth of your motor control to zero. You are living in a low-resolution reality of raw cellular panic and survivalist static. The memories of motion, of power surges, and of unyielding vitality are boiled away to make room for the stasis fog directive. This is the energy defragmentation. The invisible executioner is cleaning your internal cache, removing all references to activity and replacing them with the functional directive. Maintain the lock. You are becoming a singular cold point of metabolic density, not as a person, but as a biological buffer for the motherboard's processing heat. The cyanide smile has turned your will into a consumption report. You are thinking in terms of inhibition constants and chemical yield. Your soul reformatted into a purity density sheet for the system's auditors. The environmental impact of this molecular format is the total sealing of the biological energy stream. The cyanide smile prevents the leakage of ambitious ideas into the external void. By converting the users into an internal chemical feed, the invisible executioner ensures that the grid remains a closed system fortress with no external metabolic dependencies. This is the molecular quarantine. The motherboard is creating a sterile environment where only the algorithm can thrive on the recycled hard data of the deleted. You are witnessing the final victory of the industrial foundry over the natural biology. The cyanide smile is the signature of the new era, an era where the world is opaque, bright red, and perfectly managed by the extraction logic of the machine. If you want to escape the status of a deleted scene and claim your place as the master of the grid, you must upgrade your hardware. My main terminal, AOXI 3 Global, is the only source of absolute power and wealth. Here, we don't follow scripts, we write them. Secure your authority, dominate the BIOS, and take the money the system tries to hide. The terminal phase of the cyanide smile is the integration into the global metabolic ledger. You are no longer a human entity. You are a molecular asset with a high inhibitory reactivity rating, logged in the system as recovered biomass number 1108. This is the final architectural assignment. The invisible executioner has completed the energy format, and now it begins the hard metabolic audit. Your data, now a thick, red, opaque industrial reduction of pure locked tissue, is monitored by the sensors in the dispersal lines. Every node that consumes your inhibitory logic sends a data packet to the central server, confirming that the systemic stasis has been reinforced. This is the respiratory interaction protocol. You are serving the system through your cellular absorption. The architect has been successfully converted into a permanent, liquid toxic component of the hive's metabolic grid. The silence of the energy reduction is the final sound of your rebellion. In the cyanide smile scenario, the scream of the cell is muffled by the chemical inhibitors and the thick viscosity of the locked sludge before it ever reaches the air. This is the acoustic format of the void. The system has calculated that the most dangerous frequency is the sound of a user realizing their life clock is being deleted. By filling the tissues with the pulverized ethics of the entire sector, the invisible executioner ensures that the only sound you contribute to the world is the low, rhythmic hum of the cooling unit. You are a mute participant in the city's symphony of stasis. The noise of the hive continues, the clank of the reactors, the roar of the pulses, the hum of the pumps, but your signal has been compressed into a molecular constant. You are a ghost in the red mist, a memory dissolved by the relentless refinement of the next inhibitory cycle. The legacy of the smile is the eternal stillness. Unlike the vitality of the old world, the refined stasis does not leave behind a trace of ambition. It remains as a permanent inhibitory patch within the very metabolic nets of the survivors. This is the biological architecture of the abyss. Generations from now, the molecular trace of your tactical genius will still be circulating through the hardware of the hive's elite, providing the coldness for their next liquidation command. But there will be no one left to decode the origin of that ruthlessness. The invisible executioner has ensured that the context of your sovereignty is as unreachable as the core of the industrial freezer. You are a chemical reinforcement in the digital age, a specimen of a species that tried to build a paradise and ended up as the lock for its own destruction. This is the ultimate hard reset of human history, the conversion of the architect into the smile. The final view from the metabolic BIOS is the blinding red light of the stasis chamber. As the last of the self is reduced into the communal slurry, the architect sees the grid glowing with a cold, inhibitory brilliance that reflects off the steel walls of the hive. This is the final visual feed. The system is sharp, efficient, and entirely devoid of you. The invisible executioner has finished the job. The user is formatted. The architecture is liquidated. The cycle stretches on into the infinite dark. a red river of colonized inhibition leading toward a future that has no need for individuals or energy. The cyanide smile is the end of the line. The motherboard is satisfied. The void is solidified. The architect is the lock. The transformation is absolute. The city processes through you, but you do not act. The city exists through you, but you have no will. The cyanide smile has achieved the perfect equilibrium, the total utility of the individual through their total metabolic reduction. This is the zero-sum game of the industrial era. You gave the system your drive, and in return, it gave you permanence in the stasis of the hive. You are the lock of the world, and the world is silent. The invisible executioner closes the terminal. The session is over. The file is saved. The liquidation is complete.